Hello. Nice to be here. Again, thank you, Gail. Thank Gail Boyd from Alternative Venues for Jazz for inviting me to be here. Let's see, should we wait a minute for a few more people to come by? I am here in our little pass-through office space in our house. My wife has been occupying my home office since we've been quarantining. Full respect to her and love. She's had her full-time job this entire time, which has made things work for us. Of course, during this time, I've not been working so much on live music, unfortunately, since all of that is frozen. And back in mid-March, all the shows and events we had on the schedule were interrupted and postponed and canceled. So began to jump in on some other work and trying to find meaningful opportunities to stay involved. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Let's see who's here. I can see. All right, a few more people coming in. Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here. As I was saying, I'm in a makeshift location, our little workspace downstairs, while my wife is occupying my home office. As you can see behind us, this is our Katuba from 18 years ago. We just celebrated our 18th anniversary this week. That was me back when I had a different hairstyle. The wonderful Brooklyn artist Jonathan Blum made this piece, the frame for the Katuba, which we love. Anyway, I'll just jump in. Basically, I wanted to share with you all an overview of my background, my history, what got me into this in the beginning, some of my work experiences, and what I'm working on now, what is inspiring me now. So I guess I'd look back to when I was at Northwestern University. I was a history major, specific focus in African and U.S. history, and I wanted to get more involved in concert production. There was a concert production team called A&O Productions on campus that I immediately got involved in. My freshman year, volunteering, crewing shows. Funny story there, I was crewing a Duran Duran show at the basketball auditorium, and the Duran Duran touring crew, one of their lighting guys was sick, so they asked the local crew, which is made up of most of us students, if anyone had any lighting experience. I raised my hand. I had done some very minor lighting work in high school theater, and so they had me climb up this metal wire ladder up into the rafters at McGall Hall, the basketball arena where Duran Duran was going to perform. And I very quickly was on headset and learning the ropes, so to speak, of how to use the lighting rig, spotlights up in the rafters. And before the lights went down, I was again up climbing the rope or the metal ladder up to the rafters, and all my friends were like, what's Brice doing running up that ladder? But I got to I was one of the center spot ops, so the op was shining right on Simon LeBon. Anyway, that experience gave me a bit of a reputation, and I immediately was brought into the production team, or when the next round of hirings happened, the student production team. So we were producing concerts, everyone from De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Matthew Sweet, Tracy Chapman, Tori Amos, both on campus and off campus. We did a show with Lady Smith Black Mambazo that I was able to introduce. We did a show with George Clinton down at the Vic Theater in Chicago, and just many others. It was a great experience. So there was an afternoon I was in the production office, and this woman came in and had a conversation with the head booker, the head talent buyer, who's a senior, and asked about if we wanted to help co-produce this concert or this residency with this South African saxophone player named Zim Mwana. And I was just happened to be in the office listening to this conversation. and my colleague, the senior booker, passed on it. Just felt it was not in mission with what they wanted to do. She left the office. I ran down the hall, um, introduced myself. Her name was Amanda Kemp. She worked at the Department of African Studies, and I introduced myself and told her I was fascinated and I'd love to help her out in any way. And so immediately I basically joined her team. Team by meaning it was basically Amanda and myself, coordinating and organizing and producing this 10-day long residency for Zim Mawana and his group, 5 musicians total. Coming in town, we did a small residency of shows in Chicago Cultural Center, and on campus at Northwestern. It was through that experience that I met Michael Orlov, who was working at the Chicago Cultural Center, and has been an absolute close friend and mentor, one of my closest friends and initial inspirations getting into this music. But specifically working with Amanda and Zim, the South African jazz artist, I formed a relationship with Zim and the guys that he was with, and they convinced me to study abroad my junior year in South Africa. So I did that, and I kept in touch with him. And when I was in South Africa, I did an independent field project on the history of jazz in South Africa, and had the opportunity to go anywhere for a month as a part of the academic program. And I chose to go stay with Zim in his apartment in Johannesburg, in this neighborhood called Hillbrow. Kind of rough back then. And just hanging with Zim and meeting all of his friends and different musicians. And we were in the studio, we'd go to gigs, just have like walks in the evenings with Zim. It was really impactful time for me. And it was during one of those walks in the evening in a park near Hillbrow that Zim told me about his relationship with Max Roach and his dream to come back to the States at some point. He had studied in a program at Berkeley with Max Roach several years prior to that. And mind you, this was, just to give some historical context of when I was in South Africa, it was 1996. So a year after Mandela was released, a year after the elections. So it's a really pivotal time to be in South Africa. And again, really impactful for me personally. So when I went back to Northwestern for the rest of my junior year and into my senior year, I remember the story of Zim wanting to do something with Max Roach. So at some point, I took the initiative and reached out to Max Roach's team, explained the concept, and got back in touch with Zim. And we arranged, and also with the help of Michael Orlov, again, from Chicago Cultural Center, we organized this 2-week-long residency for Zim and Max. Max and Zim did a duet at the Chicago Cultural Center that Michael Orlov helped arrange. And we did a concert with Northwestern students playing Zim's music, and then Max Roach sitting in as well. And then Zim conducting, I think it was a septet, the Northwestern student ensemble. And that was like truly one of the most impactful experiences of my student academic career. I essentially took 2 weeks off from school to become a tour manager and producer. And it was then that I knew, and also by working with Michael Orlov, I knew what my calling was, and through Mike, I saw that you could really make a career out of producing and curating live events. So after Northwestern, I had this interview out in San Francisco with Bill Grant Presents, and I understood that I had a position. I showed up on the day I was supposed to start, and this was back in the day, before cell phones. I had a pager, and that was it. So I don't know, maybe they didn't have my pager number, but I show up, and the job, they'd given it to someone else. I had previously had a contact with San Francisco Jazz Festival, so I reached out, spoke with Randall Klein, and he was super gracious and brought me into the team, introduced me to the production team, and I started basically working on the festival that year. So this was '97 of the fall. So it was the fall season of SF Jazz. And I joined the team with Hilda Mendez, whose husband is Bruce Ackley, who's in Rova. So I got to know Bruce, which was super cool for me. And Ondine Landa, this is back when she was also in San Francisco, before she was married to Seth Abramson from Jazz Standard. And Deborah Pardis, who was a local musician and organizer and beautiful person. Essentially, I was there to support them as essentially my first job out of college and helping SF Jazz with backstage production and artist liaison. I also met, just remembering now, it was at a Joshua Redman show backstage. I met Josh and Aaron Goldberg, and Aaron and I hit it off. And just remember, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we had some funny, crazy conversations. So that whole experience was super thrilling. The festival ended. I did some different music related jobs in San Francisco, and then I got a call from Bill Bragan from Summer Stage. When I was still in school, I came to New York to just have informational interviews with Bill Bragan. Who else? Robert Browning from World Music Institute, Erica Zielinski from Lincoln Center, a couple other people. Anyway, Bill, I guess, kept a hold of my resume, and they had a job opening, and we had a great phone conversation. Also, an interview with Gail Horio, who was on the Summer Stage staff at the time, and I got the job, and I took the train from San Francisco out to New York. It was like 4 days. It was, slow way to get to New York, but it was interesting and gave me a lot of time to think. And came to New York. Said I'd be in New York for 2 years and then go back to San Francisco because I loved it so much in the Bay. Of course, I never left New York. I've been here now over 22 years. So working at Summer Stage and Bill Bragan and the whole team there, and being able to produce and help with the operations and production details in Central Park was like a dream come true for me. And I worked there for 2 years. Also, Erica Rubin joined the team and led us for a bit. And then I left Summer Stage because there was an opportunity to work at McCore, which is a Jewish cultural center that had just opened up in 1999. And I was the music director. So it was a small 350 capacity seated room, but you could also make it standing. And the idea was to present artists that weren't just Jewish, but artists that people on the Upper West Side would be interested in coming and seeing. So it was everyone from Auntie Ballas had a regular residency there. We had jam bands. We did a lot of jazz shows. I did a Purim. We presented a Purim show with Perry Farrell doing a DJ set. Oh, and actually Bill Bragan spun a set, and my buddy Jeff Kay spun a set also before Perry Farrell. That was a trip. One of the big for me, the big inspiring experiences at McCore was learning about a musician. Actually, Vijay Iyer hit me too. He said he saw this beautiful vocalist perform in the old office of the Knitting Factory, and he connected me with her manager at the time, this woman Shell White, and got the cassette tape, listened to it, and immediately was blown away. Like I just knew, I just could sense something in her voice. Like, she had incredible talent. Vijay was absolutely right. And reached out, set up a show. She performed, blew everyone away. It was a small show. I think we made it maybe like an $8 cover or something. And we decided she was so good, we wanted to give her a residency. And she played for almost a year every Wednesday night. Her name is Nora Jones. And it was at one of those Wednesday night shows that Bruce Lundvall and a few folks from Blue Note came down, saw her perform, and chose to sign her. And that year, she won, it was 8 Grammys. And just super thrilled to be a part of that process. Of course, she also played down at the Living Room and some other spots during that instrumental time for her. Um, but I remember back in the day, she was shy. She was a little anxious to get in front of the audience, and even that size of an audience. But always super genuine and real. And um, we used to just you know remind her just to be herself on stage and focus on the music. And anyway, I've been able to stay in touch with Nora, and she's still such a beautiful, genuine person. Hope you all have seen some of her Zoom performances or streaming performances that she's been doing. They've been really beautiful. So after 4 years at McCore, I worked for a year at Jazz and Lincoln Center, working with Wynton and Todd Barkin, um, helping helping put together the initial season, being at the new location at Columbus Circle. And I was specifically hired to book the projects that were not just specific to jazz. So it was a Brazilian night with Hermeto Pascoal and Ciro Baptista. We did a jazz and poetry series with Gil Scott Heron and Sonia Sanchez and um, who else? Charles Brown and several other folks. And we did a civil rights program with the orchestra. Major civil rights speeches were presented by celebrities and actors, and that was definitely an impactful show. After Jazz Lincoln Center, I was at the Knitting Factory for a couple years, and it was there in 2005 where I launched Winter Jazzfest, modeling after Global Fest, which Bill Bragan, Isabel Sofer, and Shanta Take initiated, and the idea of presenting multiple groups on a single stage during APAP to give wider exposure to jazz groups that I thought deserved it, that were underserved. And it was a big success. Three different stages, 18 groups playing, sold out, and it continued as an annual event. Once Le Poisson Rouge opened up several years later, we moved Winter Jazz Fest there, and some area venues. And every year since then, Winter Jazz Fest has grown, of course. I should also just back up a second. When I was at the Knitting Factory, that was also a pivotal opportunity. After the first Winter Jazz Fest, I was approached by Danny Melnick and George Wein about working with them to curate that model experience, 3 levels, 3 stages of events that was going to be part of the JVC Jazz Fest. So that was my first opportunity to work intimately with Danny Melnick and peripherally with George. Certainly thrilled I had the chance to meet him. And to this day, he's been a good contact. So Le Poisson Rouge, I was the music director there for a decade, and over a decade, thrilled to present so many incredible shows, both at Le Poisson Rouge and building the LPR Presents, and working with an incredible team. And of course, LPR is a venue that's dear to my heart, and like many other venues in the city, definitely feeling the need to offer support, however we can give it. Financially, I know LPR has a GoFundMe pledge campaign. There's lots of unknowns what's going to happen with our live music community. There's definitely resources and ways to support, so please do if you can. In my work in recent years, I've been trying to find opportunities to integrate really thoughtful meaning in what I do. And of course, 2016 was an alarming moment for all of us, for me personally, where I realized, I knew I needed to do more and use my platform in music and live music to find opportunities to make a difference, with social justice, with humanity, with causes that are continuing to push the needle towards progress. And I didn't really understand it fully at the time, but I certainly do now. Being a curator of a venue and choosing what you put on your stage and choosing the people and the promoters and people in the community that you deal with is every day, those everyday decisions can have incredible impact. And so just imagine if you come to it from a sensibility of inclusion, which I wasn't thinking about, even certainly before 2016, in a real intentional way. And certainly in 2016, it was beginning to be more intentional. I mean, I've always had, my personal aesthetic has always been about diversity, a love of international music, a love of, music from, all over the globe, and learning, really educating myself about different styles of music. It's something that I learned, from folks like Mike Orlove and Bill Bragan and other mentors. But when you're working at a venue, there's lots of other pressures about just making money. So you have to think creatively, and filling a calendar 7 nights a week. So it gets, I wouldn't say easy, but it's convenient sometimes to get in the routine of just bringing in the same acts that bring in the bodies, and you have to find a strike a balance. Well, like I was saying, so in 2016, that was the opportunity that I saw to really think about those decisions a lot more and find ways to bring in groups that were underserved, groups that are trying to say something in their art, in their music, and amplify those messages. And it's the same aesthetic that I was trying to use at Le Poisson Rouge and other venues that we were presenting LPR Present shows, that I wanted to intentionally integrate into Winter Jazzfest. So we started doing talk series. We started doing calls out to artists, specifically saying, if you have a project that you want to present that has some deeper meaning, that has some commentary about the world we live in, that's progressive, that is trying to push the needle forward, and be very intentional about messages of social justice, environmental justice, gender equality, etc. We wanted to know about them, and we wanted to understand that as options for presenting. And we received so many that first year in 2016, going into 2017 season of Winter Jazzfest. We were inundated with projects that had deeper meaning, and we were absolutely inspired and motivated, and we just felt that personal commitment to try to amplify those projects, and we put in our messaging. It was a very interesting time because it was it felt very genuine, a very genuine development for me coming into this. But there were certain people who weren't fully familiar or didn't know us that were questioning. There was a musician who I fully respect who reached out to me, and challenged me, and I took the time to craft a message back, and then we got on the phone and we spoke about it, and it was really a fruitful and inspiring conversation that I often think back to help focus my energies forward. So in the last 4 years, Winter Jazzfest has been proudly we're intentionally been what we hope a beacon of influence and inspiration, merging and aligning social justice and championing social justice values and messages. And a couple years ago, we were approached by Key Change, which is a UK-based organization. UK-based organization asking for gender parity in programming of festivals, and we agreed. The ask was that by the year 2022, that our programming is balanced gender-wise, so that half of the groups have at least one female or one woman in the group. And we signed on knowing that in 2018 that would be the first year that we gauged those numbers. And we looked at our numbers in that first year. Unfortunately, we were right there already. Half of our artists had a woman performer in the group. So we've continued that commitment every year. So let's just jump real quick. I see we're a little bit short on time, but let's jump to current time. Like I said, my work back in the middle of March pretty much ended, and was trying to figure out ways to stay involved and do meaningful work. and had some conversations with different colleagues and brought the idea to the attention of Gail Boyd and Danny Melnick, the idea of launching this organization that would A, unify the jazz community, and B, raise money for artists that are really in need. But instead of just a relief organization, which is absolutely vital, and I, hats off to the organizations, Music Cares and Jazz Foundation of America, and a lot of the foundations that have stepped up, giving relief work to musicians and specifically jazz musicians. We wanted our effort to go into encouraging artists to create new work or inspiring them and reminding them of their value and worth. So we launched Jazz Coalition back in May, and the idea was to grant musicians with commission grants of $1,000 each. And in a short time, we were able to raise enough money to grant 50 artists with commission grants from Jazz Coalition. And we're very close to raising it and the additional $50,000. If you're out there and you'd like to help and contribute, you can go to jazzcoalition.org. We welcome your contribution. It's going to go a long way to continuing to inspire and motivate artists to create new work and keep working. And actually, now it's nearly 400 members of Jazz Coalition. There's a lot of presenters across the globe that have committed to offering premiere opportunities of those pieces for those artists when we can actually assemble again. That's a lot I said, I know, and there's a lot more. I also just want to jump in that I've recently been working with a group that's developing a collective where we're focusing on how arts and culture can inform racial justice actions moving forward. That is going to be revealed probably within the next 24 hours. So keep your eyes open. The blacksmiths are coming. And let me just look here and see if we have any questions in the chat. Thank you all for being here. Let's see. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Gail. Heidi, how you doing? Jean-Pierre. Hey, Karen. Reggie, nice to see you. Laura, how's it going? Hey, Whitney, I see you have a question. There are so many festivals that say they are a jazz festival, but many times only have one or two people on the festival really playing or singing some serious real jazz. Why is this? Why not just call the festival of sort? I hear you. The question is about jazz festivals that aren't really jazz. Of course, the name jazz has been used in a lot of different ways, marketing wise. I don't want to get too much into that, but what I will say because I get asked the question all the time about Winter Jazz Fest, how do we decide who plays under the auspices of a jazz festival? For me, I want to understand that the artist references or looks at jazz as a major inspiration, and I can hear that influence, what that is. And of course, the artist we believe is really good and has something to say in their music and maybe also their message. That's why we include them. Thank you, Karen. There was comments about the panel series this year. Of course, we incorporated a big theme of wellness this year into the conversational programming, into the jazz talks. And yes, we do plan to continue in including wellness as well as social justice and international issues and gender in the conversations. And I will continue. Gail says I have a little more time. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see any other specific questions, but I'll just say a little bit more about the my current real aesthetic, and it really just goes back to that idea of recognizing my platform and influence and trying to use it for as much good as possible. I mean, that's what we're here for, in my mind, to continue to push that needle of progress forward. And I've learned a tremendous amount, even in just the past week, where I've been involved in this racial justice initiative, which we're going to find out about. And what I've learned is when you bring core people to the table that have a similar goal, knowing that everyone comes at it from a different place and a different history and a different background, if we're all in this together and we understand what the end goal is, and that honest, genuine feeling of supporting humanity, then the trust is there, the respect is there, and good work really happens. I felt like this past week, not just as bringing in my artistic experience, from a curatorial lens, but just with that idea of respect and humanity and appropriate organizing. It's been incredible to be a part of a really fulfilling team, or really a team that I recognize, all these different values and skills. And yeah, anyway, super inspiring. Like I said, the blacksmiths are coming. Keep your eyes open. It's been a pleasure to be here. Feel free to follow up with me personally with any questions. I can be reached at brice@jazzcoalition.org or brice@winterjazzfest.com. A real quick note about Winter Jazz Fest. It's still a lot up in the air. Of course, there's a lot we don't know still about what is going to happen even in January, with venues opening up in the different stages, the different phases. We're pretty certain that we will be forced to do some sort of hybrid model with Winter Jazz Fest, where we have a physical presence in ideally the venues that we've worked with in the past, or a combination of those. And we will do a streaming experience online. And what that opens us up to the opportunity is to include venues potentially outside of New York. So that's really attractive for us that we're exploring right now. Imagine, the venues in New York and potentially streaming from those venues, but also streaming from a venue in Tokyo or Paris or Sao Paulo or Johannesburg, Montreal, etc. So really, keeping keeping the spirit of inclusivity and international contributions in the music will ideally be apparent with what we're going to try to create in January, or it may be pushed to February. We don't know. That's another thing that's up in the air. We don't know what's happening with APAP, if it's actually going to be virtual or any way possibly physical. But we're certain, even if there is a physical component, there's going to be so many normal attendees that just choose not to come to New York. So again, the more reason why we are focusing on a streaming opportunity. Any other questions? If not, it's been fun and inspiring. I was a little bit nervous coming in. I put on a button shirt for the first time in several months. Anyway, thank you all so much. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Alternative Venues for Jazz. And much love. Stay well and stay inspired.